All right, here we go. Anybody watching the recording afterwards, as always, you can skip the first 5 or 10 minutes. That should be roughly okay. Let me get this situated properly. Mute myself to begin with, edit video. Go back out here, over here. Monetization on, please. Since, praise God, I was given my monetization back. And control room, yeah, that's the place we're looking for. And we're loading slow today. All right, I'll spend the time to consume some petrochemicals. If you heard all of that stuff that sounded like pills being shaken around, that's because that was me swallowing some petrochemicals to quell a bit of the back pain I have from being bent over on the side of the road, leaning down so many times, picking up all the garbage, which it's the South, so predominantly consists of beer bottles and beer cans. But I was enjoying myself. I was listening to a few songs I hadn't listened to in a number of years. And what are you doing? Google Earth, respond to me. Thank you. I hadn't listened to in a few years, not since the final autumn that I got to spend back up home in Alaska before 2020 happened. So autumn of 2019, then 2020 came, and my job went with it, and I didn't get it back. So I'm stuck down here, living at my parents' place now, until I potentially, at some point, have an income level capable of returning home, which does not need to be that high. Actually, I was able to live off of only between like 8 and 10 grand a year, which people usually are a bit dumbfounded at, but I'll actually make a specific stream for that one of these days to actually go through like some of the different ways of how I don't spend the supposed average amount of 40 grand a year that the average American spends on their existence. All right. So I'll get these set up. Now, most of these haven't updated yet because for some reason the TDE site doesn't like update a lot of the annual data release stuff until May, even though for most countries their like their population bureaus or their census bureaus or whatever have collected and like published data and stuff already. So for most countries, usually by sometime in February, the annual like population update data is there, but like TDE won't, which is one of the few sites that actually like publishes the official data for their graphs as opposed to just runs a generic projection algorithm. But with the exception of the gray bar on the like next year of each country, that is an algorithm that I don't know what it's running on because it never actually usually makes sense. They do the same thing with like GDP numbers. The gray bar never makes sense either. But for the actual published data, TDE is the one of the only sites that actually publishes the data that the like Census Bureau of a given country publishes, as opposed to just uh, putting line further up on a linear trajectory on an algorithm. So we do have the data for most countries. So we'll get into those, see who shows up at all. And it looks like it's just you. Where is everybody? This should be visible. Been up for 5 minutes. I mean, even on the weaker ones, usually like around 5 people still show up. Right. I'm assuming despite commentary, the or comments indicating otherwise, I'm assuming the demographic data and stuff is not actually as interesting as the audience otherwise indicated. Hold on. Is it showing up just on like a general search though? Yes, it is. Okay. So it is in fact visible. All right, I'll give people a few minutes to show up then, and I'll check on stuff that I did not get to check on yet. We do. It is updated. Weekly update. Uh, Still plateauing in the 100 and teens. It's been there for about 2 years now. So continue U.S. gas production continuing to plateau where I expected. That's one of the 16 things or so that I've gotten right on my track record. I'm 16-3 for right calls versus wrong calls / predictions. Uh, blah blah blah. Oh yeah, that was a big jump during that particular cold snap a few weeks back. U.S. actually hit a one day or technically one night since it was overnight when the most heating demand was there. U.S. hit a new natural gas consumption record for single day / single night. It got up to around 167 or 168 billion cubic feet per day for just one day, that one specific day. And inventories are still decently above where they were last year and otherwise have been in the last few years. And yeah, you can see the gas production leveling off as well. That's the total from shale. But then there's also the gas production accompanying oil production and the generic conventional gas production itself. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm one of those people who doesn't care. All right, well, no one's gonna be here. I'm still gonna do it, but while we wait another minute or two, I'm gonna eat some of these gummy worms because yes, I will admit, some of the money you guys have given me, about $2 and I forget how many cents, but $2 and some amount of cents, I did waste on some sour gummy worms. I do apologize, but sometimes I like to enjoy something so that I can stay sane. For sure. The Japan upgrade, yeah. Well, I have their data, so we know the numbers, but did the site update the graph yet? No, they did not. And also the gray bar would be inaccurate anyways. Their number dropped substantially closer to 124. Since I warned you guys a while ago that as we move forward through the rest of the 2020s, Japan's rate of decline is going to arc over into uh, a steeper drop to go from around like 500,000 a year to averaging about 1 million per year drop. And then because of the way their population pyramid is set up, they'll then slow back down again and then speed back up again once it hits like the 2040s. Where are they? That is not their most recent one. I forgot where I put their most recent one. But yeah, so that was 3 years ago now. So this big sudden jump out here on both sides, move that up by 3 years, so towards the upper 70s, or in other words, approaching the average age of death for people in Japan who live to old age. They're one of the high nations that has life expectancy around 80. So this big jut outwards is approaching there. So they're going to speed up their decline rate for a number of years. But then during the 2030s, because of this curve back inwards, it's going to slow back down and then gradually creep its way back upwards and then slow back down again. But the second upward jump is going to be a more of a gradual upward creep in the 2040s for their population decline rate, because that's a more gradual thing than this just abrupt lunge out here. But so that's how that's playing out for them. And I guess we'll start with them, even if it's just me and you, buddy. So actually, did Josh even show up? Did we get Josh? Nope. Josh is nowhere to be found. Oh, now we're up to 4. Okay, now we got people. Well, not really, but uh, yeah, about the time I'd start, anyways. For anybody who just showed up, if my voice sounds a bit off, that's because I'm occasionally eating these sour gummy worms. So I do apologize for that. Ugh. And if I am randomly making noises, that's because I'm twisting around to try to decompress some of the muscles in my back, because I've been almost every day for the last 2 weeks, because I've just been hyper motivated and hyper energized almost every day for the last 2 weeks. I've been successfully going out and doing like 2 or longer 2 hour, crash walks, walking around, picking up all the disgusting redneck garbage, since, I'm trapped living down here where everyone just throws their garbage out the window of their truck as they're driving along, usually consisting of beer bottles, which then shatter into 1,000 pieces. So I just, roam around listening to music, barehanding broken glass shards into a trash bag. That's the life. If you're if you were wondering, like, does what does Max Ogier do when he's not like working on stuff? Does he play video games or anything? No. The answer is I walk around picking up everybody's garbage, because otherwise it's going to effectively replace the soil in this area. But as I said I would, we'll start with Japan then, since I'll say enough people are here now. So again, TDE is not going to update these graphs for most of these countries for a while, because that's just how they operate. Even though the data has been released, like the Statistics Bureau of Japan already released the data for the end of 2023. So for the reasons I already described, because of the way their population pyramid is set up, their decline has hit a jump upwards now. So ignore the gray bars; those are just based on a linear algorithm usually. So Japan's actual numbers for the start of this year / end of last year, whereas at the start of last year they were down to about 124.9, instead of dropping by about 500,000 or about 600,000, they dropped by about 800,000 last year. So they dropped from 124.9 down to 124.1. And that was as of the start of this year. It's now, a month and a week into the year. So they're probably close to a flat 124 million by this particular point, as in right now when I'm speaking to you. And since you mentioned why do you keep saying I have a bad connection? Says my connection's fine. Right, if my audio stops working, by all means tell me. But since you mentioned South Korea, and since it's right there, we might as well hop over here to this peninsula that is effectively just a giant megacity and is going to be turning into like some kind of cyberpunk dystopia. So, South Korea, I didn't check them for the last few days, so maybe TDE actually did update South Korea's graph. Let's see. No, not South Africa, South Korea. South Korea, nope, not yet. Okay, so while Japan peaked back in 2011, South Korea's population peaked in 2020, a bit above 51.8 million. And let me find them on my set. Here we go. Oh, yeah, and South Korea also has now taken a much sharper downward turn because, of course, the particular setup of their population pyramid. All right, here is their 2023 one, and actually so recent that no one has actually translated it yet. So their stuff is starting to creep more and more outwards and outwards, and also just the generation, each successive year zero bracket is just contracting further and further inwards. So even though they're uh, even though they're like kind of, at least until they get here, this sudden upward lunge that will hit in like I would say I'd say a few years. When would that probably hit? Probably like towards 2030. So even though these are for the most part kind of gradual, except for the sudden rebounds from these inward curves and then jumping back out. In fact, it's probably one of those that actually caused this sudden jump. But even with the somewhat linear gradualness of this slope, the constant like inward contraction of the newer generations is still enough to overpower it to a substantial degree. So whereas the algorithm bar would make it look like South Korea dropped only from 51.69 down to 51.6, according to South Korea's actual government data, they dropped from 51.69 down to just under 51.3. So they went all the way down to right here. So that's their status for this year. And while China is right there, we'll go over to China, and China's graph was updated, although it was updated with China's revised data, the data they backtracked with. So you guys may remember from one of the streams just after New Year's that China had released their data, and they declined. They peaked in 2021 at 1.413 billion. They declined down to 1.412, rounding up, and they released their data initially saying that they rounded were down to 1.409, but then they backtracked on that a few weeks ago and added like a couple extra 100,000 people to boost the rounding from 1.409 upwards to where it would round up to 1.410 billion instead. However, I don't take abrupt panicking revisions. So you said you were at 1.409, so you gave it away. You don't get to do takebacks. You can't hide your reality. Let's look at your population graph. Where are you? China, oh, we're still on 2022. They haven't done the 2023 one yet for China. Okay, so each of the age, line brackets, move them up by 2 spaces. So China's life expectancy on average is around mid 70s. So they are further and further creeping out here each year. And they will do that for the next 5 years or so by big steps, but then it'll be smaller and smaller amounts for a period of 5 years after that. And then a decline in the decrease rate for a few years before lunging upwards. And the current decently sized chunks is also being accelerated by, you can see just the last 5 to 7 years here, how rapidly their new generations, their number of newborns has just inwardly contracted like that. And that does have a lot to do in their particular case with how abysmal the CCP is making life inside of China, and constantly tells the population about how much worse they're going to make life. However, they, phrase it with sunshine and rainbows about how it's actually them making their lives better by not letting them do anything and spying on them in every room of their house and locking them in their apartments and disappearing anyone who dissents against the government. It's actually better for you that way. Your life is better. But so that's their setup. And they drop down to 1.409 billion. I will check chat like a responsible streamer. There's no one else here, and those people left. Apparently, I guess Tucker Carlson is more interesting. Okay. Well, you already saw the U.S. one. The U.S. one didn't update yet, but the U.S. went up pretty evenly. Last year was a decently like I guess and for anyone who's OCD about like whole numbers, last year was like one of the perfect years because the way things balanced out, the U.S. went up from rounded down because it was really close to it, 334 million, up to a flat rounded upwards 336 million. So roughly up by 2 million over the course of 2023. Rounded, obviously, because it's not down to the exact person. But for people, who are OCD about like having at least rounded whole numbers instead of like 336.1 or 335.8, it went from basically a flat 334 up to a flat 336. And the 2 million ish per year relative rise is what's going to be pretty constant for another, I think, like 5 to 8 years or so. And then it's going to slow down over the course of a decade until it goes down to like the point of only like 800 or 900,000 per year. Let me check. Okay, this is 2022. I'll just say that's good enough. And that is because this sudden jump upwards here was the baby boom. So these are the boomers, and this is the rough group here that is dying versus the newborn generation down here, then plus immigration, obviously. So have a few years before the sudden boomer jump upwards here, which is where it's going to cut down to closer to like 1 million plus per year. And that will be for 4 or 5 years because it stays relatively the same rate there. Then after that, heading up through the 2030s, it goes further and further out in the boomer generation like this. So later in the 2030s and then into the 2040s, this this expanding wing of boomers here will be reaching close to 80, the average die-off age for most developed nations. So the expanding that will then take it down from around a million plus per year, which it will in 5 years or so sharply decline down to, then dragging it down closer to very little gain, with immigration primarily providing the only like actual upward bit. But even with like projections that have accounted for that, most of them that I've seen don't really like accurately accrue everything. The US, a lot of them have the US peaking around like 390. Some still have the US going up over 400. In reality, the way this all curtails, the US is more likely going to level off in the sub 370 area with uh like I don't know, you can draw a median circle for like a most likely target area of like 367 or 368 million or so. So the whole half billion or even 400 million thing or even 390 million thing isn't really happening. Now, to the north here, after I check chat, anybody else? No. Oh, but we do have some people now. Okay, maybe Tucker Carlson was too boring for you guys. All right, so, well, you guys are all about to leave anyways, because that is an actual thing that happens. Anytime I talk about Canada for any reason, for some suddenly like the viewership count will drop no matter how high or low it is already. So Canada, as I told you guys back when I was doing like some population projection stuff at the start of last year, my stuff, you can only like hold my stuff against me, my projections, as long as the variables remain as assumed. And the variables for Canada did not remain as assumed. Like as soon as I had made that projection, Canada suddenly came out and announced, "Oh, so by the way, over the course of the next 2 years, we're going to double our intake of immigrant population." So Canada was intaking a few 100,000 immigrants per year, which were providing the primary source of Canada's population growth. However, then they decided they were going to do 6 to 700,000 in 2022 or over the course of 2022. Last year, the gray bar again doesn't even accurately show. Last year, they decided they were going to take in over 1 million. So Canada's population, even beyond this, then jumped, lurched even further, and is just or started the year just over a flat 40 million people. It was like 40 million and 40,000 or something like that. It was low enough to round down to 40 million, not high enough to round up to 40.1. Although it's been a month and a week, so it probably is over 40.1 now. But at the start of the year, when they released that data, it was rounded a flat 40 million, but rounded from just above 40. So Canada is skewing their data, and I can't even adjust my future Canadian population projections for you guys yet because uh, there, was a lot of debate in their government about it over the last few months, and supposedly the government has agreed actually because each party agreed to do like different other internal stuff that they wanted from each other. The the government has agreed to re-shrink the number of intake and immigrants per year back down to only like 500,000 or something like that. Now I'll wait and see if that actually manifests, but that's another like whole wrench in any potential projections I might make, because Canada is notoriously unreliable and not the wisest decision maker. except for the fact that even even their politicians who do want to make stupid decisions don't or vocalize stupid decisions don't actually go through with the stupid decisions. They do keep allowing new mining permits and expansions and further oil and gas operations. So despite them spewing a bunch of like green rhetoric, they're not actually going down the path that Chile and Europe are going down. Oh, now we got Josh. Okay. So that's that group. Then we have Mexico, who TDE completely abandons listening to the actual data of. So COVID really affected Mexico on a like populist psyche level, and there, according to Mexico's actual data, they went from in 2022 they went from this 126.25 up to 127.1. However, uh, for some reason TDE just instead of sourcing data from Mexico's government again, just randomly typed in 129. Okay. So yeah, no, that's not what happened. So their actual population as of the end of last year, start of this year, was what was around 128.6 or 120 or 128.5. So it was around that general area, and they are because they're slowing down quicker than people thought they would, and they're still listed on a lot of sites as likely to peak in population up at 165 million. However, no, they're pretty clearly going to peak around like 142 or so, or between 141 and 143. Or at least I'm hoping that seems obvious enough to people other than just me. Do I have their graph on here? Their like actual graph, not the generic one, because this one is generalized. That's not accurate. I know I downloaded a bunch of actual adjusted ones, but oh yeah, there's the one for Japan's most recent one. But where is that's still listed as Bandicam? No, that's Belgium. No one cares about Belgium. Uh, Bandicam. Nope, that's Australia. I do actually care about Australia, but let me actually check Bandicam itself. No, might have been one further up. No, no. All right. I'll try to get a hold of theirs then. Oh, I did get the newly adjusted one for Turkey. Turkey about 6 or 7 years ago really began to take a massive inward contraction, as you can see here. Now, hopefully, I'll be able to get a larger version of this, but we'll see. Cuba, since Cuba's right there, I did they update the graph on here yet? They might be the first one other than China where we actually see the updated graph. Did they? No, they have. I have no idea what they're thinking with this gray bar. Cuba is in decline. They plateaued for a while at around like 11.25 million, and now they've been on their way down. So they were down at the start of last year to 11.09, and as of the start of this year, they have gone under 11. They are down to just under 11 by uh, a few tens of thousands or so. At the very start of the year, they were at 10.99 million. Now, not entirely because of a higher death rate than birth rate, there is also a large part to play on the hand of uh, outbound migration, as most people in Cuba, for obvious reasons, don't really want to be in Cuba anymore, so they're leaving. And since they're right there to the south of them, Jamaica also had been on a plateau for a while. Go down to J. Did you guys update? Probably not, but we'll check anyways. Nope. And what is this? What is with this? What is this gray bar? So they plateaued for a while, and this sudden jump upwards post 2020 was from when the tourism industry shut down. And so a lot of the workers in the tourism industry are Jamaican, so they all had to come back home. And then things have been gradually returning to normal. And also now their death rate has jumped past their birth rate. Well, technically, it has been past it for a while, but the for the first time, like a larger age bracket than the newborn age bracket actually reached the age of death. And so Jamaica, over the course of last year, declined from 2.83 down to a flat 2.8 million. And then the one other island nation we'll be doing is the Bahamas up there. And they are actually incorrect on TDE's part, at least. But I think that might be because they're sourcing from World Bank. Oh no, they're still sourcing from Depstat Bahamas, but as of the 2022-2023 actual census information, the Bahamas is slightly lower than was perceived. Instead of 404,000 last year, or sorry, the year before last year, and they assumed they would go up to 407,000 by the end of last year, start of this year. In reality, they found out they are actually only at about 402,000. So it's not a huge difference, but slightly lower than expected. But the birth rate in Bahamas is also like dropping towards one pretty fast. Granted, there's not really a lot of space in the Bahamas, anyways. Nope. Audio bitrate it's not zero. I mean, if people couldn't hear me, I'm assuming they would tell me. So, Brazil. Brazil has not correspondently corrected, or TDE rather, has not corrected Brazil's data graph-wise. They conducted a census recently, and their numbers came up with 203. However, by their own admission, they likely undercounted a decent bit because they were still doing literally like knocking on doors in person, and a lot of people don't respond. So I'm using a another, although Brazil is much more developed than Nigeria, uh, Brazil is still considered a rising nation. So I'm using another rising nation of similar size and their found census errors. And so Nigeria's census found them undercounting by about 2 million. So I'll assume until Brazil's statistics agency like gives a specific number on their revisions, I'll assume they undercounted by probably about 2 million. And that was in 2022 that they gave the 203 number for, so that would have actually been about 205. And then a likely increase of about 2 million, as that has been their annual so far. And although that's going to be curving down, so at the moment, Brazil most likely 207 million, potentially 208, but we'll say definitely probably the 207 or 208 area. So Brazil is likely, I said before, to peak around 228 to up to 232, as opposed to the a lot of the projections, which are still saying Brazil is going to go all the way up to somewhere between 260 and 280. It's not. It's going to peak around 230. Then we head down south for them, or from them to Argentina. Why did I X this off? We need to be in here. No, not that one. There we go. So Argentina, similar to Turkey and a lot of other countries, you will actually see starting in the mid 2010s, began to see a inward contraction in number of births that then, in the last couple years, ever since 2020, super contracted, but have now stalled and are not contracting any further. As you can see, that small, like, double stack of Jenga blocks holding up the pyramid there. So Argentina's increase is slowing down pretty drastically. And they were, excuse me, go up where I'm telling you to. Early Argentina. TDE has also not updated their information yet. But if you look at a lot of like just the generic like populationcounter.com websites and things like that, and you look at Argentina's population, it's going to say like 47 million or 48 million. However, no, it went up. It still went up last year, obviously by a decent enough bit, but only to 46.5 or 46.6 million. So Argentina is going to slow down, or already is doing so pretty quickly, and their peak is probably going to be more around like 52, maybe 53, instead of the 65 that so many of the sites keep claiming. Their thin neighbor Chile has just broken over 20 million, and they were at, hold on, where are they on the sheet here? They were at 19.96, and they went up uh, just barely to over 20, coming in at 20.09, or rounding up to 20.1 million people, as Chile has been well slowed already. Their current, uh, I don't think these things updated yet. They're probably, oh yeah, they're still on 2020. So theirs like started going down, and they're actually down around like 1.2 at the moment. Do I have an accurate one for their pyramid? No. This is close, but they're having the same like steeper inward contractions that a lot of the Latin American countries are, and Turkey as well. So this is from 2020 then, and you'd have to move the expansion bulge here up several years closer to the age of death, but the actual population reaching age of death will be about here. And then you would trace that down here, and the inward contraction for Chile would have come to, I think, close to here. So that's getting close. Chile does receive some inward migration. They've taken a fair deal of the people who have fled from Venezuela, because Venezuela kind of was Venezuela and it fell apart. And so everyone has fled Venezuela, and by everyone I mean 7 to 8 million people. So I will show you what it looks like when a government just flat out lies. like completely and bold-facedly, an example that is actually not Russia for once. So, most of you should know Venezuela has collapsed, and whether you've seen the news, whether you live in Latin America and have seen the people themselves, you should be relatively aware that, 7 to 8 million people have fled that country. So this is a just flat out lie on the part of the Statistics Institute of Venezuela. Their population did not do this. I believe the Google graph actually shows something more regular, something closer to the truth. Yeah. So that is pretty close. And as things have kind of stabilized, they have gone back upwards by a bit, not like really, but they've gone back up to over 29, and they're somewhere between 29 and 30 million. We don't actually have like a accurate data thing because, again, the only thing we're going to get from the Venezuelan government is lies. And so we have to just, make rough guess estimations based on the number of people who fled the country and the number of, reported children being had in the country. And the uh, other Latin American countries do Peru after I check chat, like responsible streamer. Chat is dead. Okay, so it's just me. Peru is probably also TDE's probably not going to have updated them. And it looks like, oh, wait, they did. They did actually. I'm kind of surprised. So Peru is still climbing, and they will be for a bit, as they have not, their fertility rate has not plunged downwards to the levels of like Colombia and Ecuador, or especially Chile. Peru's is actually still above 2, but Peru has a net outward migration, and also their fertility rate is uh, it's basically around replacement level at the moment. So it's not they're not framed in a growing pattern, and also it is decreasing. Uh, Hold on, what was their setup at least on the graph? Where's that J coming from? At least on the generic Google graph. Yeah, so they were at least as of 2020, they were at 2.2, but I believe as of I forgot them off the top of my head. I saw them just a few days ago, but I believe as of their 2023 data, they were at like just under 2.1, like 2.09. So they are going downwards, but not at the contracting contracting bottom of the pyramid speeds that places like Chile are, or Argentina, or Ecuador, or Colombia, or Brazil, basically the whole place. So Peru, in terms of like demographic vertical, sides on their demographic structure, will be steady for a bit longer. I'm waiting to see what they do trend wise, whether they follow the others like more steeply down below 2, or whether they still hang out above 2 for a bit longer. They may be holding out because remember, the others all started their renewed dive down under 2, down into the mid ones in the early 2010s or the mid 2010s, depending on which country you're looking at. Whereas Peru actually didn't do a similar thing. So Peru might just be doing a Vietnam and instead be doing a gradual, slow decline, but ever decline nonetheless. But, anyways, Peru's population went from about 33.4 up to about 33.7 million. And then their neighbor, who we just mentioned, Ecuador, was at about a flat 18 or just above 18, and they went up to 18.23 million people. And I think I have, is that the thing from Ecuador? No. I think I have the thing from Ecuador in here somewhere. Is this it? Yeah, that's it. So this was the linear generic algorithm projecting the decline in number of births over time, and the blue line is the decline that actually happened in Ecuador from around 320,000 births per year in 2010 to only about 260,000, or rather 250,000 births in 2022. So uh, Ecuador is going down pretty steeply. I don't think I have the actual version of their pyramids, probably only the generic one. Oh no, we do have their real one. Okay. So yeah, you can see it there. It started 10 years ago, or rather 12 years ago technically, because this is from 2022. So for them it started in the early 2010s. They started a, inward heave at the bottom of their population pyramid. And then we'll do Colombia, and we'll do Panama, and then we'll swing over to Europe and Africa. So, Colombia, where do I have Colombia? Colombia is slowing down noticeably as their fertility rate has been dropping down and is down to close to 1.5. Oops, I went way past them. But I think even on just the stair steps of the increase graph, it is noticeable. Yeah, kind of. Not entirely, but kind of. You have to have the eye for it at least. Yeah, because yeah, down here, like you can see, they were increasing by about like 600,000 per year, whereas now, or there was that just a was that just a one-time thing there? Okay, now this has them fluctuating between like 400 and 600, but they're closer to like a consistent 400. But they were at 51.87, or rounded up 51.9. And as of their 2023 data, or 2024 data, however you want to phrase it, they came in rounded down at 52.1. Now it was close to the midline. It was something like 51 point, or 52.14. But their slowdown is like becoming even more noticeable, or will become even more noticeable once this year's stuff is actually out. And Panama, one of my arbitrarily favorite countries, Panama's has become quite noticeable, and especially because of all the unrest and stuff that they've had. Part of which was like all the nationwide like protests about that mine that then got shut down. Panama has deeply slowed over just the last like year or two. So they would have been up at around 4.54 million, maybe, instead up from like 4.36 or something. However, instead, they are only up to 4.46 million as of this year. Then we're going to swing over here and we'll anchor ourselves around the Mediterranean. Tunisia, uh, Tunisia, Tunes, Tunisia, uh, all the way down to T. Did TDE update your graph yet? They did not. So they've gotten wobbly. with larger outward waves of migration, especially after the harder hit that their economy took from COVID, and also they did have a decent number of deaths from COVID. You can see there, but their rate of outward migration is pretty high comparatively, like to the size of the population. But they are still gradually going up, and a number were repatriated in over the course of last year, as Europe has been asking Tunisia to try to cut down on the amount of migrants crossing the Mediterranean. So Tunisia has actually like been catching and stopping a lot of crossings. So they did. This gray bar is actually one of the few ones that's probably close enough because they came in for this year's data or the end of last year right at about 12 estimates of either just below or just above a flat 12 million. And this is probably where they're going to plateau off. So they're likely, I mean, they'll probably still like make their way up like a bit, get closer to like 12 and a half, but that's probably going to be it for the most part. I should check my dead chat. My dead chat is dead. You guys are a collection of gravestones. You know, if you guys stay dead, I'm not going to feel guilty about suddenly eating some of these sour gummy worms. And then their neighbor, or one of their neighbors, one of my arbitrarily favorite countries, Algeria, Al Jazeera. We have, where are they? They're probably in the column of A's on my list since I did it alphabetically. There they are. Okay, so they do have they have a weird issue with their statistics office where some years or some pairs of years they'll like randomly only report like this tiny bit and then report like the growth of 2 years worth in the next year. So uh, accounting accounting for corrections and actualization, they are just over 46. They're at 46.1 or 46.2. Definitive numerization not in yet, but about 46.1 or 46.2. And they are slowing down, but they're going to go beyond where Argentina is going to go, and they will probably peak somewhere between like 58 and 62, as opposed to Argentina, who's also around 46 million, only probably going up to like 52 or 53, because Argentina is, having a massive inward contraction in their most recent 0 year age brackets, whereas Algeria's birth rate is actually still decently high. Again, the whole Google graph just instantly stops at 2020 still. I promised you guys I'm going to make yet another Google Doc where I'm going to continue these graphs since Google for 4 years now has refused to move them beyond 2020. So don't worry. If Google won't do it, I will. So I will make a new doc for you guys that I'll link with all the others under the videos, where I'll actually continue the graphs since Google refuses to. But Algeria is not up at 2.94 anymore. They are still up at 2.7 though. So they are going down, but they're not like plunging down, below replacement or, down towards one, like a lot of other countries are. Or like even, one of their neighbors is, whereas Morocco is floating like a bit above replacement level, Tunisia has been, since the late 90s, they've been at or below replacement level, whereas Algeria has been up there, but now they're making their way back down. And as I said, for their most recent data of last year, their fertility rate is at 2.7 or so. Um, Swing over to Egypt, one with a rather decent population issue. So Egypt is now over 100 million people, despite having no capacity to support that many people. Uh, decent living area, obviously along the Nile, being limited in space, and also the amount of food they can grow domestically being restricted to only enough for between 30 to 40 million people able to feed, depending on how well the agricultural land is managed in a given year. So Egypt, a few years ago, passed over 100 million, and as of the end of last year, start of this year, they have hit, they've gotten close to 107. They are at 106.7, actually. Or since it's been a month and a week since the start of this year, they're probably at 107.8 by now. Now they are going down. They are declining somewhat. The what were the numbers? What were the numbers I saw in that one update? I'm trying to remember. They but over the last 3 years, their fertility rate has dropped by about 10% or so. So they're not diving, they're not nose diving like East Asia or Europe or Latin America is, but they are starting to contract. And swinging up here from them, we have Turkey, who is drastically slowing down because of the because of that inward indentation I showed you. I think Turkey actually, I think the TDE actually updated Turkey's graph. They're one of the few that they actually updated before May. No, of course not. So Turkey is up around 86 or so. The gray bar for once is actually close to correct, and they are slowing down at a decent rate to where they're probably, and I think I said this in last year's episode, are probably going to peak around 100. Whereas, a lot of the generic populationcounter.com type websites still show them projected as like peaking around 120 million. But in reality, they're probably going to peak around a flat 100 or so, if not in the upper 90s. Then we can swing into Europe. Greece, Hellas. Hellas is one of the countries who TD did update the graph up. I do know that much. Where are they? Here. So Greece has been declining steadily, and then they had some further major drops, and so they've gone down now to 10.39 million from what was their peak? 11.1. Okay. I thought it was 12, but I guess it was 11.1. So they've gone down and now had their steeper drops and are down under 10.4. Although their fertility rate is recovering, though, as I told you guys in the last stream, in the last few streams, they got down close to like 1.2 at their lowest point. Similar numbers to like a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries post USSR collapse. but Greece has been recovering over the last 15 years or so. Although their 2010 economic crisis put a stall to that for a few years, but it still resumed afterwards. They've gradually made their way back up over 1.3 and even back up over 1.4 to now, as of the end of last year, a fertility rate recovered to 1.44. So they may even be going back up to 1.5 or 1.6. We'll see if that keeps continuing. Over across the Adriatic here, we have Italia, who had not, TDE had not updated yet. Or did they? I mean, the data's out. They have it. They can use it. Did they update yet? No, they did not. And also that we're back to the gray bars. This is not being on point. So Italia is heading its way down, and they had a bit of a larger drop than the previous year, matching the one from 2020 down to 2021, although that drop had a lot to do with COVID deaths. But this one was just natural deaths overlapping births. And the data from Italy for 2023 end year was a drop from the just under 59 down to 58.6 million. And swing over this way, and we'll hit France. France did update, or the TDE graph for France did update with France's data. Did we? At least I'm pretty sure they were one of the ones. Yes, they were. Okay. So France is still climbing by about 200,000 per year, most of which is immigration, as France's demographic pyramid is pretty flat up and down. So they got up to 68.14. And in France's case, so this is 2 years ago. So you have to move these brackets up. And 80 is around the average age of death. So we are now move these up by 2. We're now 1, maybe 2 years away from the sudden outward lunge here of France's boomer generation. So that is going to oversweep the majority of their primarily immigration boosted population increase. So that's why I've said that they're probably going to plateau out around 69, maybe 70, unless they pull a Canada move and suddenly, go from taking in 200,000 immigrants a year up to, a million. So if they do that, then obviously that will throw my my prediction out the window. But at least if they do that, then I won't actually be wrong about it. If they don't plateau, it's at like in the 69-ish range, because they will have changed the underlying factors. Never change the underlying factors. Max Ogier relies upon them. And then their neighbor and age-old enemy, Deutschland, I already checked this morning, they did not update their graph yet, but their data was a mild increase compared to the previous year, because the previous year was 2022, in which Germany took in a decent number of Ukrainian refugees and also continued with their mass importation of populations from Turkey and Iraq and Afghanistan. So, although a decent number of the Ukrainian refugees since returned home, because once it became clear that Russia wasn't going to pull it off and that the majority of Ukraine was going to actually remain relatively normal-ish, most of the people who fled then returned home. The initial number of people who fled in like that first month was about 8 million. And out of those 8 million, 6 million have returned home. a solid 2 million is tentatively remaining outside of the country, though, and understandably, a large portion of which are from areas that, are they can't really return to because they're under Russian occupation, or are from areas like Kharkiv, which are under, constant shelling. So that return of a bunch of them did drag down Germany's increase. So otherwise, Germany probably would have gone up to 85 million or so. But instead, because a large number of their Ukrainian refugees returned, that then left Germany with a lower boost from their labor importation migration policy, which they are changing now. Apparently, to they're going with the skilled labor only, and like I call it the Norwegian approach, the Norge approach of families only. No no 20-year-old, no 20-year-old single males with no like documented history of their existence, and and like no story to tell for themselves. That's that's how Sweden or Sverige got itself into so much trouble. But Deutschland did go up still because of taking in migrant labor, and but they only went up from 84.4 to 84.7 million over the course of last year, and they are probably going to eke out around 85 or 86 before then beginning to contract back down as their pyramid ultimately overtakes the boosts of their migration. So yeah, this is 4 years ago now. Actually, that was the end of 2022 or 2020. So 3 years ago. So move each of the brackets up by 3 years, and you'll get this grouping here is now up around 80 or around the average age of death. So in a couple years, you'll suddenly then jump up to this amount here, which is definitively beyond the new birth range. And then from there, they will be creeping up into this massive boomer wing here. So that will overpower even their migration intake, or at least so I assume. They could, double back on their reneging stuff. And wow, I think this is actually the deadest chat we've ever had. Are you alive, chat? Are you actually there? Nederland, the Netherlands. Uh, did they? I think TDE did update Nederland's graph, and I think we're making good time. I should be able to finish before 7, which is what I promised Josh. So if he wanted to stream, he can do his stream. They did. Okay. So Nederland has uh, uptaken or upticked the number of immigrants that it's taken in, probably in foresight of seeing the fact that they're also about to have their boomer, their population outshoot boomer wing here is about to hit their age of death in a few years. Also, they have had an expanding number of births over the last few years, and they also have been admitting more migrants. And like I said, that's probably because their government has looked and seen that, they're going to go from this here to suddenly just jumping outwards to this very soon. That will, well, this is for last year, so uh, this will come in probably 2 years or so. It will make the first jump and then the second jump. So they let in more people last year, so they went up more than normal from 17.6 up to 17.8 million. And like I said, They're probably going to peak out between 18 and 19 million, unless, of course, they go like extreme with this and, crank it up like Canada did to letting in 1 million people a year or something. Polska, my precious Polska, did drop substantially. A portion of that was from a lot of Ukrainian refugees returning home over the course of 2023, but also my beloved Polska has entered its downward drop phase. So that there was a full million drop from or almost full million drop from 37.6 down to 36.7 or so. Uh, a a big chunk of that again was Ukrainian refugees returning home. The influx in 2022 did sort of dampen Poland's drop that it otherwise would have. Otherwise, it kind of basically the drop between this one and this one, and then this one and this one would kind of look basically even. But so because that drop was buffered and this one was then extenuated by a bunch of refugees returning back to Ukraine, you had a near million drop from 37.6 down to 36.7. Uh, who else we want to do here? Belarus. Did TDE update Belarus? I don't think so. At least as of when I checked last night. Did they? No. Well, here's another actual rare instance where the gray bar is pretty on point, actually, because that is actually the drop that Belarus saw over the course of 2023. It was a pretty even drop of 100,000 from 9.2 down to 9.1 million. I think they peaked at 10 or way back above 10, or yeah, just a bit above 10. And then they blah, blah, blah. They're evened out for a bit, and now they're doing another plunge. Russia. We shall discuss Russia's claimed numbers and then their actual numbers. Then we'll do Ukraine, and then we shall move down into a few Middle Eastern countries where things are always interesting. Did they update yet? No. Okay, so uh, Russia or Russia, by their claimed numbers, are at 144.9 as of the end of last year, start of this year. However, they refuse to acknowledge deaths, combat deaths in Ukraine, and they refuse to acknowledge the nearly 2 million people or so who have left the country and not returned, because it's about 2 million who left and a couple 100,000 that came back. So mixing those and the combat deaths in Ukraine is a pretty sheer drop of about 2 million. So in reality, they're instead of just under 145, they're probably just above 143. But they're not going to acknowledge that for a while. Uh, in terms of like public statements and speeches about how the people who left were traitors, they have like said that the people left. They have even admitted to more numbers than initially, because initially they locked it at only 270,000 and insisting that only 270,000 people left. However, in a recent angry speech that one of Putin's subordinates gave, they they actually slipped up and admitted that at least 700,000 people had left, and blah blah blah. They were never Russian to begin with. But they're not counting those people as like lost from the population. They're just shunning their existence and like not acknowledging them. But it was funny because Russia's initial like claim of only 270,000 was undone by their own buddy Serbia because Serbia publicly stated that 370,000 Russians had come to Serbia, which was higher than the total like entire number that Russia initially claimed even left Russia to begin with. So there was a decent discrepancy going on. So Ukraine was at about 41 million before this started, and initial combat deaths plus the massive 100,000 person massacre in Mariupol in the first year, then accounting for all the people who left, uh, you, Ukraine dropped down, and the natural decrease that was going on anyways. Ukraine dropped from 41 million down to around 32.5 or so. And then with the re-influx of about 6 million people and accounting for another year of combat deaths and civilian deaths as well, they jumped back up to basically a flat 38 or so as of the present moment. Uh, Romania, I think. That's how you're supposed to say it. I think they're one of the ones who TDE actually did update. They are, okay. Romania actually had a flat year, or a relatively flat year. Uh, they went up by just a little. So they got down, to 19.04, but they did creep up just a tiny bit to 19.05. Not, that much, but hey. And their peak was back in 1990 at about 23 million. Then we'll come down here to the Middle East. Iraq is still, it is slowing down, but it is in rounding the numbers. It is still pretty solidly going up by about a million per year, a bit under a million, but within a year or two, that will be rounded down to only about an increase of 900,000 per year. But the gray bar in this case is another case of it actually being pretty correct, where it is their population for the start of this year was at about 45.5 rounded up, so a bit below it. Although, since it's been a month and a week, it probably is now over 45.5, obviously. Their neighbor Iran is slowing drastically. So, as you guys may have heard if you're at the streams frequently, Iran has had to like tacitly admit that their fertility rate has actually crashed drastically over the last number of years. I wonder if their government's been doing anything that might be discouraging people from wanting to have their children grow up in that society. So, they're also they just sometimes they get lazy like Algeria does and just screw around. So you have to like counter adjust these for the trend. But their fertility rate is actually down to only around 1.4 and falling. So they they're now below Turkey. Turkey has actually overtaken them, and they are up to 85.3 million as of this year, and they are probably going to end up peaking more in the mid 90s, potentially even the lower 90s. Saudi Arabia is one of the ones who like really screws around with their graph. Like they're one of the ones who does it the most. Like, look at this mess. Look at this mess. 2021 doesn't even exist. What is this? But so their population did continue actually increasing. This was just I don't even know. I think since they do everything, since their government officials do everything else that Muslims aren't supposed to do, they probably were drinking and got drunk when they were typing in the numbers. But Saudi Arabia has slowed down. Saudi Arabia, despite being like religiously fundamentalist, their fertility rate is actually down to like a flat two. So they are at, or I believe, yes, they came in at the start of the year basically right after, right under 36 million. And, a while back, people thought that over time they were going to like rocket up to 70 or 80 million because of, the religious conservatism. But now it's becoming pretty clear that that's not going to happen. India, I should check chat. Chat is truly dead. But India is slowing down rather quickly. They're now down to 1.8 children per woman, I think. They had leveled out at like 2.1 for about 5 years or something like that. And then over, once we hit the late 2010s, they started going down. I think that was the start of when Modi took over as president, or he might have been president for longer, but I think that was when Modi took over. Uh, and so, things have been not all that fun. So they've been starting to tip down since then. And they are, TD has not updated theirs yet. I'm pretty sure. At least I checked this morning and it still wasn't. And it indeed still is not. So they have slowed down to a point of only now going up most recently by about 12.5 million. And so they, over the course of 2023, their population went up a bit more because of people fleeing into India from Myanmar because of the war, and because of additional inward migration from Bangladesh. So they went up a bit more than they otherwise would have. Oh yeah, and also a lot of Indians returning from the richer Persian Gulf countries as they're starting to send their imported workforce back. So India went up to one. They went up to from 1.7 rounded up. That's 1.374. They went up to 1.388 billion as of the start of the year. Now it's been a month and a week, so they're probably at either 1.389 or close to 1.39 billion itself. But while many predictions still claim India is going all the way to 2.1, and others claim they're going to go up to 1.8 or 1.7, in reality, it's become pretty obvious, or at least I have it put down, they're going to peak out somewhere around 1.55 or so, or maybe a bit below that, even like 1.54 or 1.53. Whereas Vietnam is likely going to start curving out very soon and will be peaking between probably 114 and 116 million. They, as of this year, or sorry, as of last year, I even made a video about it around the middle of the year because that was when it happened. They crossed over the threshold of 100 million. And as of the start of this year, they were at 100.4 and continuing to slow down, but gradually they have slipped now down to 1.9. And I think it was they're basically they're dropping pretty consistently at 0.05 per year. So this year's fertility rates at the end of this year will probably end up being like 1.85. Then next year's something like 1.80. So Vietnam is declining like at a steady pace. The Philippines, I think they were one of the ones that surprised me, and TDE actually updated them earlier than I expected. No, they did not. Okay, well, the Philippines, that's another gray bar that's way out of whack. So they released their data, and they went from what was it 111.6 up to 112.9 million as of the end of last year, start of this year, and they were over two for a while, but just recently they have now started going down under two in terms of fertility rate. They went pretty fast down to I think 1.6 or 1.7 during 2020 during COVID, but then since then they've come back up to 1.9, and it looks like they're gonna like flatten out at 1.9 for a while. Indonesia uh, did did conduct a like full round census recently, and their previous population data releases each year they found were a bit undercounted, not by a huge amount, but they were undercounting by a bit. And so instead of the 278 point something that they would have otherwise been assumed to be at, as of the start of this year, they're at about a flat 279 million. However, they are flattening out pretty quickly as they are down to, I think, actually like 1.4 infertility rate right now, despite still being a rising nation. So they do I have the updated one for them? That's well, that's India's actual fertility chart. You can see, or their population pyramid. So they're not having like a collapse inward. They're having a more of a gradual contraction inward, equal to the slope, the slope outward from above. Indonesia, no. Okay. So all I have is the kind of generic, like amalgamated average, but they are going inward like this at their bottom generation. But it's been another 4 years since 2020, so this has gone in even further. So it's probably about like rate year by now. So Indonesia is probably going to end up peaking in the lower 310s, like around 313 or something like that. Their northern neighbor, another one of my arbitrarily favorite countries, Malaysia. I believe they released theirs. Did they? Or I might be confusing them with Peru. Or sorry, I believe TDE updated them. Nope, not yet. That is the gray bar is pretty close though. Their agency released their data as basically rate at 33.2, and they are rounding and starting to level their way off. They're probably going to peak out around like 36 or so, maybe 37, depending on certain trends. Uh, no, that's just the amalgamated average one. I thought I had their updated version. Then we swing down here to Australia. Australia is another one that has now thrown me off because I can't use my original projections for them since they pulled a Canada and also decided that they are going to overcrank the immigration allowances that they do. So they are also throwing themselves up to about 1 million take-ins per year now. Their 2023 numbers, the gray bar is non-representative in their case once again. So they went up from 20 just under 26.3 up to by over 700,000 up to a flat 27 million as of the start of this year. The overwhelming majority of which was just from immigration, as actual physical number of children born in Australia is not all that high. And then we'll run through some in Africa, and then that will be about it. Anybody? Oh, thank you. We do actually have people, and YouTube still says my bitrate is 0. All right. So you guys came in at the end of this one, but you can obviously you can go back on the timeline and watch from the beginning. South Africa did TDE update theirs. The data is out. There's no excuse to not update the graph. The data has been released. Of course they didn't. Okay, so uh, the I guess 63 would be right there. So no, the gray bar algorithm is still pretty off, or it's off by a little bit at least. So they went up from 62.0, I think. Yeah, rounded down. So 62 flat. They went up to 62.8 million, and they will be slowing down soon enough, as I think they've started heading down towards 2 or under 2 in terms of fertility level. The Congo. Not that we can get entirely accurate data for the Congo, but we have a rough idea. And they are also slowing down like basically every country is. However, most of the populationclock.com type websites you go to are running on a linear algorithm. In the Congo's case, it's an algorithm a lot of them haven't even changed for the last like 15 years. So that has them like way up at 112. In reality, they did still go over 100 last year, but they're at 102 or so. Or that's about where they should be. Nigeria, where did I put Nigeria? There they are. All right, so where they I doubt TDE updated Nigeria's graph. Nope, of course not. So when they update it, it's going to jump up to around 220 or sorry 222.5 or 223. In reality, it's closer to 225 million people because, again, by their own admission, they found that they undercounted in the census by about 2 million. Although they might, when they give their data to TDE, or when TDE actually decides to plug the data into an Excel chart, because that's all this is. Come on, guys, I'm doing this faster than you. Seriously. Uh, they might have given that correction, so it might actually jump upwards to a correct spot of 225 or so. And then Ethiopia is an overcount case because they refuse to acknowledge the now probably 2.5 million people that have starved to death by the government's own design, because most of those people are in Tigray and the other separatist regions that want to break free and become independent, of which the government has responded by, attempting to starve the people to death. And I mean, you know, they've starved quite a number of them. I mean, there were only like 6 or 7 million people in the Tigray region, I think, and 2 million of them got starved to death. Although, that's the Ethiopian government isn't reporting that population change in the Tigray region. Oh, look, the gray bar might even be trying to account for that. However, that would still be incorrect, though, because it would just be an adjustment of the over increase listings from the past few years, because this has happened over the past few years. So, whereas Ethiopia's next uh, update that they state will probably be 126, in reality, it's more around 124 or 123 and a half at the moment. So if it were correct and it accounted for the like 2 or 2.5 million people that have starved to death or died from, lack of medicine because everything has been cut off to the separatist regions by the government, then effectively it would be a blue bar that came in here but was pretty much level with the 2022 number. Somalia, the complete rebound, making a comeback case is what I put them there. Uh, Not entirely like completely reliable stuff because there is a lot of disconnect, but roughly, and also some numbers include Somaliland, some don't. Total Somaliland included uh, should have, as of us hitting this year, just passed over 18 million. And then Kazakhstan, another one of my arbitrary favorites. Where did I put them? Where are they? Oh, there they are. Oh yeah, I forgot. They got just over 20. So they're rounding down to about 20 flat, as they just hit 20 million in like late November. Mongolia, just at the end of the year, hit a flat 3.5 million. And then Pakistan is an issue, especially given their problems. Where did I put them, though? Where are they? Oh, there they are. Okay, so they are still uh, they're not deliberately over-reporting, or like maliciously putting out false information, but they have other concerns, so they're just not really. It's not at the top of their priority list, and so a lot of things they're also just they're not putting in the effort and are just defaulting back to relying on projections and algorithms. So they claim a jump up to 236, and the supposed numbers that this is going to end up showing is 241. In reality, they're actually probably at the most likely one is 232.7 as of the start of this year, which is still high for them, especially given their circumstances. But they are going to be like drastically overstating numbers. Again, not they're not doing that on purpose, like for any like malicious reason or whatever. It's just what's happening. And I've overrun my preset time limit, so I have to speed through some of these so I can pretend I somewhat kept my promise to Josh to give him time to do his stream. Did they update Thailand? They did not. Okay, so Thailand peaked at 66.5 and has been on a gradual decline since then. And they went down by a bit more again from 66.09 down to 66.05 million. They're not going to start like going down by larger amounts for another several years once their population pyramid actually like catches up to that point. Were there any other ones I considered critical that I missed so far? Okay, places I know I have frequently speaking viewers from. So Spain, España. I think PD already updated their graph, so you can actually see it on the graph. Come on, let's go. Yeah. So Spain also decided to crank up the immigrant intake numbers. Uh, Hold on, let me see. Do they have a sudden boomer outsurge that's about to start dying? Is that why they did that? Similar to everybody else deciding to do that? Where is Spain? Oh, I don't have a real one for Spain. I just have this one. Uh, no, not really. Spain's like outward thing isn't like a sudden jump with a boomer wing like everybody else's. Theirs is really gradual. Although they are having a contraction inward of births there. So I don't know. I guess they're just I guess they're just doing it for the heck of it. But they jumped from 47.43 up to 48.06 million. And uh, the UK, I know they didn't update that graph yet, but I have their numbers. And they did jump from like 67.5 million, I think, up to 68.1 because the UK also suddenly decided to pull a Canada and double the number of immigration applications they passed through. Norgay uh, does continue going up by a little bit each time. They're pretty close to peaking, but they're just at about 5.5 now, coming in at 5.49 million people. Sweden or Sverige, where did I put them? They continue climbing up, not as much as they did during the 2010s because they realized that taking in 500,000 people into a country that at the time only had like 9 million people was a bad idea. They have climbed up a bit, still further though, to from 10.45 up to 10.52 million, and they will be leveling out soon, but not too soon because life expectancy in Sweden is really high, along with over in Norway as well. Okay, I think that is pretty much it. And I've hit the point I was supposed to stop by anyways. So that is going to be it for this one. I will see you guys in the next video or whenever. So thank you all for coming around, and I will see you all around next time.